Welcome into episode 23 of the PrintFest DFS podcast. My name is Justin Ruin. I'm going to be breaking down the Week 17 Draftkings main slate. And of course, it's an absolutely loaded main slate with 15 games, so let's get right into it. I'm just going to start with the breakdown of the motivation of each one of the teams going on this slate. So starting with Vikings at Lions, both of these teams have been eliminated. Jets at Patriots, both teams have been eliminated. Steelers at Browns. The Steelers have clinched the division. They're likely benching their starters. And the Browns have to win to get in. The Ravens have to win to get in against the Bengals. The Bengals have been eliminated for a while. Falcons at Bucks. The Falcons are eliminated, and the Bucks have clinched the playoff berth, but they can't win the NFC South. So they're kind of just playing for seeding in this spot. But Bruce Arians has said that they are just still going to go full go. Dolphins at Bills. Dolphins have to win to get in. The Bills have clinched the division, and they get a 2 seed with the Pittsburgh loss. So it's possible Bills could be benching starters. I'm recording this on a Friday night at about 8 p.m. So no news on that yet. Cowboys at Giants. Both teams need a win plus a Washington loss to get in. Jaguars have been eliminated. The Colts need a win plus a Titans loss, Ravens loss, Browns loss, or a Dolphins loss. So Colts are likely in if they can get a win. They just need a loss from any one of those 4 teams to get in. Seahawks at Niners. The Seahawks get a first-round bye with a Green Bay loss plus a Saints loss, and the Niners have been eliminated. Chargers at Chiefs. Chargers have been out for a while, and the Chiefs have clinched a first-round bye and are likely benching starters. Titans at Texans. The Titans win, and they are in the playoffs. The Texans have been eliminated. Cardinals at Rams. Both teams win, and they are in. The Rams can also get in if a couple other things happen, but they're going to be looking to win this game. Injury news in that game is that Jared Goff is out, and so is Darrell Henderson. Cam Akers is questionable, probably leaning towards doubtful in this spot. So John Walford will make his first career start in the NFL. Saints at Panthers. The Saints, they get a first round bye with a win plus a Seattle, or with a win plus a Green Bay loss and a Seattle win, where they were going to tiebreaker over both of those teams in the 3-way tiebreaker. Panthers have been eliminated. Packers versus Bears. The Packers get the first round bye in the NFC with a win. The Bears need to win to get in. Wrapping it up here with the Raiders and Broncos, both teams have been eliminated. So that is all of the motivation on each of these teams here heading into week 17 on this slate. So starting position by position, I'm going to break down my favorite quarterback plays of the slate. What you can see here on the screen is basically it's what I find to be the most important things at the quarterback position. And this will kind of go position by position. This is just basically the data sheet that I use to find my favorite plays at each position. So this has salary, projected pace of this game based on situation neutral, whether at home, the team total, whether the team leans to the pass, to the run. So in early downs in the first half, over the last 3 weeks, what is this team's pass rate? So the players' Draftkings points per game over the last 5, their completion percentage below or above expectation. That is a next gen stats statistic here over the last 5 weeks. Their average depth of target over the last 5 weeks, the yards per attempt over the last 5, and their rushing yards per game over the last 5. And then some matchup stuff, the defense yards per attempt, defense points per game, defense DVOA, and the pressure rate. And then just a projection column here. So my favorite quarterbacks on the slate, the first one is Kirk Cousins. We can see a lot of green here. Now we know that this team and the Minnesota Vikings like to lean on the run when they can. In this spot, Dalvin Cook is out. They're taking on Detroit. They have a 30 implied total. Kirk Cousins has had 17 plus DraftKings points in 8 straight games, so he has a really nice floor. He's averaged 24 DraftKings points per game over his last 5. He's been really efficient. Um, he basically gives you like nothing on the ground. He's averaging 19 rushing yards per game over his last 5, so really not much on the ground. But he's taking on this horrid Detroit defense that allows 8.4 yards per attempt and 25 DraftKings points per game to opposing quarterbacks in a 30-second DVOA. He's projecting as the third best value on the slate currently here on Friday night. He's probably my favorite point per dollar play on the slate. I also really like Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield obviously struggled last week not having any of his wide receivers, but in this spot where they need to win to get in and they're taking on a Steelers defense that's going to be benching their starters. I think the projection is low. He's 5.5K. At home should be a decently paced game. 26 implied total. Actually, over the last 3 weeks, the Browns have been leaning more towards the air. They've, league average early down pass rate over the last 3 weeks is 54%, and the Browns sit at 65%. So they're really actually tilting towards the air more than usual. And Baker Mayfield's been awesome over his last 5 weeks. He's averaged 23 DraftKings points per game. He's been super efficient, averaging 8.2 yards per attempt. We know he gives us like nothing on the ground again, but if the Steelers were starting their entire defense in this spot, I'd probably kind of be off of Baker. But at 5.5K in a must-win game versus a bunch of backups on defense, I think that Baker is pretty strong here. I think this projection is a little low. 16.6 seems a bit low, in my opinion. So another guy I like here is, begrudgingly, I kind of like Tua down at 5,100. It's just kind of cheap for a team that needs to win to get in. And the biggest news on this Tua play is Ryan Fitzpatrick has COVID and he is out. So Tua is their guy, and he will not be benched in this game. And Tua has kind of been up and down. He's not like pushing the ball downfield. He only has a 6.3 average depth of target over his last 5 games, and he's only averaging 6 yards per attempt, and really doesn't give you much on the ground, only averaging 12 rushing yards per game over the last 5. So, it's basically all I can say is he's cheap. It's a must-win game. We know he's not going to get benched, and the Bills might be benching some defensive starters. That's about all I got on Tua. He's only 200 more expensive than John Walford. So, we have that at least. If you need to pay up and you have the salary to get there, obviously Aaron Rodgers is an awesome play with a 28 implied total. He averages 25 DraftKings points per game over his last 5. He's 7,400. In this next gen stats statistic here, the completion percentage plus or minus expectation. I mean, the guy is averaging 7% above his expected completion percentage over the last 5 weeks. I mean, that is just ludicrous. He's averaging 7.8 yards per attempt. Again, another guy gives us like nothing on the ground, 13 yards per game. But this Chicago defense is kind of starting to fall apart a little bit. They've allowed 2+ touchdowns in 7 of their last 8 games, and Rodgers has thrown 3 or more touchdown passes in 11 games this year, out of his 15 that he's played. So, I mean, he's just on an absolute tear. Just an absolute tear. So I could see Rodgers just continuing his MVP season in a game where they need to win to get the first round bye. And then Lamar Jackson, at 8K, another must-win game. Ravens have to win to get in. We know Lamar loves to run. He's been crushing on the ground. He's averaged 83 rushing yards per game over his last 5. That is ludicrous. And he's averaging 8.5 yards per attempt through the air. He's been pretty efficient through the air. He's averaged 27 DraftKings points per game over his last 5. They have a 28 implied total. And taking on Cincinnati is just a putrid-ass defense. And, Lamar, his floor is so solid. He's had 20 plus DraftKings points in 4 straight games. He's had 50 plus rushing yards in 8 of his last 9. I mean, he's really just really nice on the floor and uh, has a nice floor and also a decent ceiling here if you can get into the box for rushing as well. So that's kind of everything I like at quarterback. Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfield, and Tua if you need to pay down, and then Rodgers and Lamar if you're going to be paying up. Moving over to the running back position. Um, Again, what you'll see here on the screen is kind of everything that I use to build my running back pool. So I'm going to filter this by touches per game over the last 5, and we can kind of see the highest volume players here on this slate. So let's start with the big dog, Derrick Henry. So the Titans need to win to get in. Henry in his last 2 games versus Houston, he's had 211 yards and 264 yards from scrimmage with 5 touchdowns. So yeah, the dude's an absolute smasher. He's at home, or he's not. He's not at home. He's on the road, but he's in a dome in a game that should have a decent pace with a 32 implied total, 7.5-point favorites. We know the Titans like to lean on the run. They run the ball early on in the first half. In the last 3 weeks, 56% of the time. League average sits around 44, 46%. Over his last 5 weeks, he's averaged 25 DraftKings points per game. He's played 63% of snaps on average, and he's averaged 24.4 touches per game. That just leads the entire slate. It's not even really close. The one thing you can really ding Derrick Henry on is his targets, and he's only averaged 1.8 targets per game over his last 5. So we know he's just not going to get anything at all in the passing game. But I mean, when you're taking on this defense, this Houston defense, they are the bottom of the barrel in the NFL. They allow 5.4 yards per carry to opposing running backs against them. They're 30th DVOA, and they allow 33 DraftKings points per game to opposing backfield. So, Henry basically takes every carry in this backfield. So, at 9,400, it's expensive for a running back who doesn't catch the ball. But in spots like this where he's a big favorite, the massive total, his touchdown expectations absolutely through the roof. And, he needs like 220 some odd yards to get to 2K. I think if he gets close in the first half, if he puts up like $150 in the first half, they might just ride him out the rest of the game and get him to the 2,000 milestone. So I think the second best running back on the slate is going to be Latavius Murray, and this is because Alvin Kamara tested positive for COVID and he is out. So Alvin Kamara hasn't missed any games in 2020, but in 2 games he missed in 2019. Latavius Murray had 32 touches and 30 touches in those 2 games. In those 2 games, he had 150 yards from scrimmage and 2 touchdowns, and then he had 157 yards from scrimmage and 2 touchdowns. In those 2 weeks, he scored 35 DraftKings points and 39.7. He's 5,600. I don't see a way that we can viably get away from Latavius Murray taking on this Carolina defense that allows 4.9 yards per carry. They're 21st DVOA against the run, and the Saints have a 27 implied total, and they're 6.5-point favorites. This is just you just play running backs in this spot objectively and just expect to make money. So Jonathan Taylor, I think, is another one of the top plays on this slate. We know what kind of elite talent he is coming out of Wisconsin, and now he's really starting to turn it on and hit the afterburners here at the back end of the season. And he's in a really prime spot. So the Colts need to win to get in. They need to win plus, Tennessee, Baltimore, Cleveland, or Miami lost. One of those teams have to lose. I mentioned that at the top. He's at home. Yeah, he's 7,400. Yeah, he's a little expensive. but he's at home against Jacksonville. The Colts have a 31 implied total, 14-point favorites. He's averaged 22 DraftKings points per game over his last 5 on 58% of snaps. And he's gotten 19 touches per game over the last 5 weeks. Yeah, only 2.8 targets, so he's kind of like Derrick Henry in that way. But he's averaged 117 yards from scrimmage, over his last 5 as well. Now he's finally starting to get stuff inside the 10. He's averaged 1.5 opportunities, that's carries or targets, inside the 10 per game. And I was taking on defense in Jacksonville that has just been shredded the last couple of weeks. On the season, they allow 4.5 yards per attempt. They allow 30 DraftKings points per game to opposing backfields, and their 22nd DVOA against the run. So Jonathan Taylor, another high volume, elite talent running back in a game where the Colts must win. I think that in week 17, having running backs, especially that are going to be on teams that need to win, I think is extremely important because they will lean on them even harder. So, yeah, I mean, at the running back position is Derrick Henry, Latavius Murray, and Jonathan Taylor. And then everything else, in my opinion, is for tournaments. Sure, you can go down to Malcolm Brown. I'm not sure on the ceiling on Malcolm Brown if Cam Akers is out, just because John Walford is there, and it's kind of caps the ceiling of that entire offense. So, yeah, I mean, I think that, and Myles Gaskin, I think that we can't deny Myles Gaskin either. At 6,500, he's 900 cheaper than Jonathan Taylor. And again, in a must-win spot, he's probably going to play like 75% of snaps and get 20 touches. And we know he has a stranglehold on the goal line roll. So, yeah, I mean, Myles Gaskin's right up there with one of the top plays on the slate. So moving over to wide receiver, I think that there's one guy at the very top that we're just going to have to keep playing, and it's Davante Adams. And yeah, there's just kind of no getting away from this thing with Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers. And these two just have a connection, and they just don't stop coming after it. They just do it every week. He's 9,200. It's a must-win game to get that first round bye, which we know they want. Adams has averaged 28 DraftKings points per game over his last 5, 10.6 targets per game, a 0.9 weighted opportunity rating, which is a combination of air yard market share and target market share. That is a Josh Hermsmeyer statistic. And he's averaged 96 yards per game over his last 5, and he averages 1 end zone target per game. That's just ludicrous. I mean, look at the rest of this guys on the top of the slate. Let's just sort this by salary. Look at the rest of these guys on the top of this slate. End zone targets per game. Calvin Ridley, 1.4. Adam Thielen, 1.1. Stephon Diggs, 0.6. DeAndre Hopkins, 0.7. Allen Robinson, 0.9. Jefferson, 0.5. Mike Evans, 0.9. Metcalf, 1.1. AJ Brown, 0.5. Brandon Cooks, 0.5. So you can kind of get the gist of this. If you have anything around like 0.9 and higher end zone targets per game, yeah, I mean, your touchdown expectations through the roof, especially when your implied total is over 27, and it currently sits at 28 for the Packers. And we know Chicago, I mentioned when I was talking about Aaron Rodgers, they've been struggling to give up the touchdowns. I mean, they've allowed multiple touchdown passes in 7 of the last 8 games. So I think that the chances of Davante Adams getting the box in this spot is extremely, extremely high. I mean, he's had 24. Shout out to Rich Rebar. He's had 24 touchdowns over the last 21 games. That's a Rich Rebar stat. I mean, good God. It's ludicrous. He's on an absolute torrent of a pace. So I think that on this slate, there's going to be a lot of value at wide receiver. And one of the biggest ones is Josh Reynolds. So Cooper Kupp is on the COVID list. He is out. I mean, this Rams team, yeah, it's a win and end game. John Walford's back there, AAF superstar. But, Josh Reynolds is 3,200. And over the last 2 weeks, he's ran 32 and 39 routes compared to 5 and 9. That's courtesy of Player Profiler. Yeah, I mean, Josh Reynolds should be a full-time player in this offense with Robert Woods and then Van Jefferson behind him. So at 3,200 as a full-time role in a game, it's a must-win. I mean, it's kind of hard to get away from, even though it is John Walford. I mean, it kind of limits his ceiling, but I think that a medium projection here is probably around 10 or 11 points for Josh Reynolds, and at 3,200, you'll gladly take 10 or 11 points on this slate. I think another guy that is really interesting now with the news that DJ Chark and Colin Johnson are both out is Laviska Shenault. So we know Shenault was a good prospect coming out of Colorado, and he's second round pick. We know that he's a really good athlete. I think he had a problem. I think he was injured during his 40 times. So his 40 times not as good as what it probably truly is at the combine. But, he's been pretty consistent. He's had at least 5 receptions in each of his last 3. He's had a 20+% target share in each of his last 3 as well. Taking on Indy that allows 9 yards per target. League average yards per target sits around 8.4. So, it's pretty bad that this Indy defense. I mean, it's kind of odd. I mean, like they're 7th DVOA against the pass, and they allow a 65% catch rate, but they do allow 9 yards per target. So basically, what I get out of that is they don't allow a lot of targets to the wide receiver position, but when they do, it's usually pretty efficient. So, Chenault's averaged 6.2 targets per game over his last 5, and they're definitely going to be forced to throw, being 14-point dogs here against Indianapolis. At 4,200, you can certainly do a lot worse with DJ Chark and Colin Johnson both out. That really opens up a lot of targets, specifically with Chark being out. So Shenault, I'm willing to take the dip on a player who's really talented down at 4,200. So 2 more guys I want to bring up here at wide receiver is Curtis Samuel. So Curtis Samuel is a guy at 5,300 who's kind of like a Swiss Army knife, right? I mean, he's averaged 7 targets per game over his last 5. He's been a wide receiver 3 or better in 8 of his past 9. Or no, sorry, 8 of his last 10 games. Another Rich Rebar stat. Yep, and he's averaged 17 DraftKings points per game over his last 5. So at 5,300, if he just gets his average over the last 5 games, I mean, yeah, he's getting there. But I think the biggest thing with Curtis Samuel is that he's getting rushing attempts. I mean, he had 7 rushing attempts last week, and Mike Davis and Christian McCaffrey are both out. So, his ADOT is 9, so it's not great, but, he's not really getting too many downfield shots. But, God, I mean, this guy's a legit red zone threat. I mean, if he's going to start getting these carries inside the 10, and these guys, Rodney Smith and Trenton Cannon are certainly not any threats. I mean, it's possible that Curtis Samuel could get 5 to 8 carries in this game added on to his 7 targets, and that kind of usage at 5,300 is something we're really looking for. Because these targets are not the kind of targets that running backs are getting. It's not like these little 1-yard dump offs that Austin Eckler's getting. These are targets 9, 10 yards downfield that are like legit wide receiver targets. And then you add on another 8 carries. That kind of projection is difficult. Projecting his carries are definitely going to be difficult with Mike Davis and Christian McCaffrey out, but he is interesting at least at 5,300 if you're in that range. Then one more guy I want to talk about is Jerry Jeudy. So Jerry Jeudy had 15 targets last week, and he only caught 6 of them. I mean, he's really just kind of getting all these uncatchable targets. I mean, his ADOT is 15, so he's just getting a lot of these deep shots, and that's it's fine. His weighted opportunity rating over the last 5 weeks is 0.48, which is nice, and he's taking on this Raiders defense that allows 8.8 yards per target. Like I mentioned, league average is 8.4. And the Raiders are 22nd DVOA against the pass, and they allow a 66% catch rate. So, the matchup is nice. He's a really talented player. We know, he was first round pick in this year's draft. The Broncos have a 24 implied total. Drew Lock sucks. We know that. But At 4,200 at the same prices as LaVisca, I think I prefer LaVisca with DJ Chark and Colin Johnson out. Um, but Jerry Jeudy is at least in play for the targets that he's getting and the talent of the player. I know Drew Lock really stinks, but hey, so does Mike Glennon for LaVisca. So yeah, the wide receiver position is kind of pay up for Adams and then find value. Darius Slayton is a possible value as well. Taking on Dallas. He's basically just getting deep shots, and that's really it. His ADOT is 17 over the last 5 weeks. So you can certainly do worse. I mean, he's averaging 5.6 targets per game over the last 5 as well. So, yeah, I mean, you can do worse than Darius Slayton at 4,100 against Dallas. But, yeah, I definitely lean LaVisca. And if I can get up to Curtis Samuel, I definitely prefer that as well. So at tight end, there's no Travis Kelce on this slate. We know that. So Evan Ingram is definitely an option. Irv Smith, I like, and then Cole Kmet. So let's start with Evan Ingram. So Evan Ingram taking on Dallas. Now he did get injured at the end of last game, and I haven't seen the injury reports. But assuming that he goes in this game, he's 3,700 taking on Dallas, and he's averaged 7.6 targets per game, a 0.56 weighted opportunity rating, and he's averaged 59 yards per game over his last 5. If he gets 59 yards in this spot at 3,700, I'm pretty happy with that. Dallas has a 74% catch rate and their 20th DVOA against the pass. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly not a matchup to run away from. He's pretty cheap at 3,700. You could probably project him for probably 6 to 8 targets in this spot. Yeah, I like Evan Ingram. I think my favorite tight end on the slate, though, is probably Irv Smith. So Irv Smith's been a top 5 scorer in 3 of his last 5 weeks. And Detroit, I mean, God, we just saw them get absolutely smoked by Tampa Bay on Saturday. And I mean, good night. They're at 32nd DVOA against the pass. They allow a 66% catch rate to opposing tight ends. And Irv Smith, I mean, he's averaged 5.7 targets per game over his last 5. And Kyle Rudolph, again, is out. Irv Smith's basically running a route on, 80% of dropbacks. So he is their main tight end. I know that he splits with Tyler Conklin a little bit when they run the 2 tight end action from 12 personnel. But, 3,900, Irv Smith. He's averaged 13 DraftKings points per game over his last 5. That's really solid. If he gets you that at 3,900, you're pretty happy with that. He needs about 12 to really kind of get there. So, tight end is just an absolute dumpster fire. We know that. If there was a punt tight end, I would give him to you right now. There are no good punt tight ends. I mean, you can go down to Cole Kmet. Certainly, you can go down to Cole Kmet at his bottom barrel price of $3K. He's basically playing 95% of the snaps, but he's still kind of splitting a little bit with Jimmy Graham, and Jimmy Graham gets all of the end zone stuff. Whenever they get down and close, it's usually Jimmy Graham. Cole Kmet did. He was open in the end zone this last week, and Trubisky just totally missed him. So it would have been a walk-in touchdown. But, in this spot where the Bears are definitely going to have to be throwing against the Packers, I think that you can definitely do worse than Cole Kmet at $3K. If you really need to put it off. But I really prefer Irv Smith, and I definitely prefer stacking him with Kirk Cousins. It's just taking on this putrid Detroit defense. And, yeah, sure. If you want to pay up for Darren Waller, yeah, he's a wide receiver basically, but he's 7,100. George Kittle, they've been eliminated. He played 50% of snaps last week. I'm not sure what his workload is going to be moving forward, but I mean, if we knew he was going to play his full role at 6K, yeah, George Kittle is a really good play. Absolutely. But we just don't know that. And then Mark Andrews at 5,800 taking on Cincinnati. He's kind of been coming on as well. He's averaged 16 DraftKings points per game over his last 5. 7.3 targets per game. It's 0.78 weighted opportunity rating. Really solid. 73 yards per game. And 0.9 end zone targets. So really solid for Mark Andrews if you can get up to him at 5,800. He's definitely a solid play. So those are kind of my favorite plays on the slate. I think that if I were to pick, I think the running back position is pretty straightforward. I think it's Henry, Latavius, and Jonathan Taylor. I really think you don't get away from those three in cash games. At quarterback, it's get up to Rodgers or Lamar, or come on down to Kirk in the mid range. And then if you need to kind of punt, you have Baker down there just below. And then if you're really in a tight situation, if Devontae Parker and Jakeem Grant do play, Tua is probably in play. If Parker and Grant are out, I'm not touching anywhere near Tua. At wide receiver, get up to Devontae, get him in there. He's just so consistent. And then probably have to play two of these cheapies with LaVisca, Josh Reynolds, Jerry Jeudy. Probably have to play two of those guys. And then at tight end, Irv Smith is definitely my favorite by far. He's an ascending talent, second-year player out of Alabama. I really like Irv Smith. Evan Ingram if he's healthy, and then Cole Kmet if you need to punt it off. So with that, that is going to do it for the Week 17 version of the PrintFest DFS podcast. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I will get to them. If not, good luck, everybody.